And how do you feel about the debate? How do you think everything worked out for Murphy?
Well, first of all, I'm very glad to be here because I was born and raised just a few blocks away from this college, and my grammar school is right across the street, so it's good to be home. First of all, I think that Chris did an outstanding job and in a key area of education. For Nancy Johnson to say that No Child Left Behind has been funded has to be I mean, it's really a joke were it not so deadly serious for students across the country. The state of Connecticut has lost $18 million. Students in the classroom have lost that under her watch. Number two, I'm a member of the House Intelligence Committee, so I know something about the FISA law, and I think that this poor member of Congress needs to read up on it. For her to describe that there's paperwork and files is absolutely pathetic. We have reformed the FISA law 15 times to bring it up to date, so that we can wire, so that we can listen in, so that we can do that all under the law. The difference is what she voted for does not come under the law. It does not come under the law. It's why there were problems in the courts with it. So she is ill-informed on this. Everyone wants to be protected. And I know that Chris Murphy understands this, that he'll vote the right way. We don't have to throw our Constitution overboard to do this. FISA has worked. It will continue to work. But it needs to work under the law. That's the difference. She voted for something that is not even constitutional. And third, shame on Nancy Johnson for overseeing the biggest fiscal mess in the history of our country. She is part of that. She considers herself a leader in the Congress, then you have to accept the responsibility for that. So on every front, education, on the fiscal condition of our country, and certainly on the national security of our country, I think that New Britain and I think the people of this congressional district are going to make a change. People want to change. I walked my old neighborhood today, and they are sickened about what's going on in Washington. Everything that's gone on. It's not relevant. The American people are being left behind. So I think that there's going to be a change. I think there's going to be a big change. And this young man, Chris Murphy, is going to lead with dignity and lead with effectiveness.
I just want to get your views on the debate. How do you think Chris Murphy worked out?
I think he did very well. I think he was much more knowledgeable about the state of Connecticut because he spends more time here, and I think as a member of Congress, he would be much better connected to the state. I was astonished at some of the things that Nancy Johnson said. The full funding of No Child Left Behind, which she then had to eat, I thought, and admit that she was really wrong about that. The Iraq War, it's just the George Bush speech. We don't want to fight him there. We want to fight him there, so we don't have to fight him in New York City. You know, Iraq was a distraction. It's a disaster. Most people know that. The military knows it now, and she's still clinging to the George Bush line. And by the way, I mean, what I think was not said enough is that she, as a Republican, enables and empowers the Tom DeLays when he was there, the Dennis Hastert. She votes them into office. They throw these little crumbs around. She knew, by the way, she's on the tax writing committee. She knew that vote on the minimum wage was a total hoax. She knew it was going nowhere. They wanted to give her and Rob Simmons and a few other Republicans, so-called moderates, a chance to vote. Say they voted yes on the minimum wage. They didn't vote yes on the minimum wage. This was a hoax, and she knew it. I think it was exposed here. I think it'll come out more in the next few weeks.
Now, obviously, I'm assuming that you're a Chris Murphy supporter. So, real briefly, can you tell our people why they should support Chris Murphy?
Well, look, I would say if you're happy with the way George Bush has run this administration in the country, if you're happy with our place in the world, if you're happy with where health care is and where energy policy is, then you shouldn't support Chris Murphy. This guy is about changing things. It's been his whole way of life. It's been his record. I was 29 when I ran for the first time and won. I was actually 30 when I was sworn in as a young congressman representing this area. I think that group, it was a long time ago, but it was the first post-Watergate class. We were about change. We followed through on what we had promised. I think this group, Joe Courtney, Farrell, Murphy, will do the same thing. And by the way, I don't think we could have 3 better candidates anywhere in the country than the 3 that we have here to carry that message of change. So if people don't want it, they're not going to vote for it. And but at least they got to be aware of what the choices are.
Okay, why don't you give me your views on the debate? How do you think it all worked out for Murphy?
I think that it was very well for Murphy. He did an excellent job. He really talked about the things that we need to move in this country very effectively, and I think he's a clear winner in the debate by a long shot.
All right, now, one of the things that stunned, I guess the proper word to use is stunned the crowd somewhat, was Nancy Johnson's suggestion that No Child Left Behind was fully funded. What are your views on that program, and how do you think Chris Murphy can help fix that program?
I think that it is a bill that is entirely based upon its testing program and gave enormous amounts of money, as she said, to the testing companies. And it's not based upon trying to improve the educational system in the country. It uses standards as an excuse for not doing the investments that are needed in our public schools to make sure that the quality of education that kids get improves. Look, we know as policymakers that the way to improve the quality of education is to put more teachers in more classrooms and shrink class sizes. And that's the one key thing that this bill doesn't do. And so she did not fund quality education.
Now, for the undecided voters out there that are still questioning who to vote for, can you tell them why you think Chris Murphy would make a great congressman?
I think that what John Garagosian said a few minutes ago is key. It's not just about this race. It is. Chris Murphy is a much better candidate, but it is also about the country as a whole. Chris Murphy is going to go up there and he's going to vote for the Democratic leadership that will change this country, that will actually make a meaningful difference in the way the country is run, that will challenge George Bush, that will ask the key questions about the war in Iraq, about what's going on in the economy, about what's going on in oil prices, and across the board try to establish policies that will make the country better for average everyday people, not the rich people and corporations that the Republicans are really for.
Okay, I just want to find out about your views on the debate. Who do you think won, and what did you take from this debate?
I thought this was a great debate because it called in question our $9 trillion deficit, which has been basically, Murphy, I think, hit it really hard when he said that in the Clinton administration we were left with a surplus, and then we came in and under the Republican leadership we've had a $9 trillion deficit amount. And much of the deficit has been amounted by the tax cuts and us going to war in Iraq. And much of the money that we've gotten has come from the Chinese. So are we going to put our defense on the Chinese? That's one question that Americans have to ask themselves. So in that aspect, I think that he raised an important point. I think also he talked about energy independence, which I think also ties in with national security. And if we're ever going to strengthen our national security, one of the things that we need to do is get our reliance off of foreign sources of oil. So I thought he brought up a great point there, too.
I like the fact that they were able to talk to each other and respond to each other. I think that they both handled themselves well. I think that she handled herself as a lady, and he certainly came across as a gentleman. I do think he was nice enough to thank her for coming to the debate, and she didn't return the favor, and I appreciated that he did that. But I also like the fact that they spoke very specifically about the different issues that they were talking about, and they didn't just talk in generalities. They spoke very specifically. I do think that he has the experience to bring to this and showed that in the answers that he gave. Even though Nancy Johnson's been there for 24 years, I think Chris Murphy can definitely hold his own in Congress.
Now, what was why don't you just give me one of the puzzling things you heard from either one of the candidates today?
I don't understand that Nancy Johnson doesn't get the problem with the Medicare drug coverage. And the fact that the Republican Party and she have said over and over and over again how important free market is. And yes, it's lovely that Walmart and Target were able to do that. But again, the bulk buying power of the government, you cannot argue with that. And I think to take the free market out of it by writing the law the way that they did surprised me.
Now, what do you think about No Child Left Behind? You think it was fully funded like Nancy Johnson said?
No, I don't. And I know I have friends who are teachers and principals in the state of Connecticut, and I don't know if it's different in other states, although it's a federal program, so it shouldn't be. But in this state, it is not fully funded. And to say that it is just, that's just not true. And I think the fact that she said the mandate is for testing, that's true, and that's the focus. But there's a whole lot more that goes on before you can test somebody. You can't teach somebody and have success just by testing them and having the right outcome from that. You have to start, as Chris Murphy said, from the ground up and go all the way through the educational process.
Murphy?
I think Chris did an excellent job and presented very specific information about all of the issues that were discussed. And I think he was, in some ways, very polite and not coming on more strongly against what Nancy was saying, because I just think it would have been rude, I guess, in that environment to have said something too strongly. But I think the main point is it doesn't really matter if she has independent opinions from the Republican leadership, because in this environment where everything is a party line vote, her independence doesn't mean anything. It doesn't carry over into any substantive change. So she says, I'm for this and I'm for that and I've tried to do this, but they've been holding the majority in Congress for 14 years or 12 or 14 years, and none of these things happened because of that. So I think that is really the underlying message. It would have been rude to come out and say, Nancy, it doesn't matter what you're saying, but I think that's kind of the underlying message.
All right, I want to talk to you about the debate. How do you think you did?
Well, I think we did great. This was, I think, actually a welcome relief from, a lot of the stuff that you see on TV from Nancy Johnson and others. We had a pretty civil debate, and I think in the end there was a really clear choice. If people want change, we gave them that vision. If they want a rousing defense of the status quo, they got that from Nancy Johnson today.
Okay. There's a few moans out there in the audience from a couple of her comments. What was the most surprising thing you heard from Nancy Johnson today?
Well, I think one of the more surprising things was how confident she was that we have the right policy in Iraq right now. She seems to think that there was a plan in place and thought that it was a good thing that we were fighting al-Qaeda there. I think people need to know that we created a lot of the mess there and that we need a congressperson who's going to commit to a new direction.
Now, in terms of No Child Left Behind, I know as somebody from Danbury, education background, I know a lot of people have a lot of problems with No Child Left Behind. Nancy Johnson said that No Child Left Behind was fully funded. What would you do in terms of No Child Left Behind to try to fix that problem?
Well, it certainly isn't fully funded, and that was a real interesting comment on her part. Any school district in this state, Danbury at the top of the list, knows that we have underfunded No Child Left Behind. You've got to put the money behind it, but you also have to start giving school districts and states some flexibility to get out from under some of the most onerous requirements, and I'll absolutely commit to working on that when I get to Washington.
Okay. Now, where do you go from here?
Well, today we're going to make a couple other stops probably in New Britain. We've got a couple more debates in Waterbury and Danbury at least. I wish there was more, but I think that these are all real great forums for people to see the difference between the two candidates.